Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome back to the Kiana Canada Show. Before we get into tonight's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that your likes and your shares, what it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that videos like this are important. But we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm, that is not an indication that videos like this are not important. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to be discussing tonight is the debate between Anna Kasparian and Pearl Davis, and it was hosted by Word War Debates. This was a quite interesting debate, although there were some aspects of this debate that I disliked. There were a number of ad hominem attacks in this debate, which I do believe really takes from the importance of debating. So I'm going to try and just give a summary and commentary on some of the arguments that I found to be more interesting and some of the arguments that I believe that could have used more work. And we'll start with the opening statements. What I didn't like about Anna Kasparian's opening statement was that she had an ad hominem attack in the opening statement. Instead of attacking the phenomenon or the ideology of being a trad wife, she attacked Pearl as a trad wife. And I know it sounds quite strange, but it was as if she was attacking her and making fun of her for being a trad wife instead of talking about the disadvantages of being a trad wife, if that makes any sense. Howsoever, Anna Kasparian did have a very strong opening statement. It was well structured and she articulated herself well. With Pearl, she opened her statement with feminism is robbing men of their disposable income, and then she cites time, resources, reputation, and children. And these themes make an appearance throughout the entire debate, which was good, for her. And it was good, I think, when we're looking at how to debate, there is a consistency with that. However, what I didn't like, what I didn't like is that she brought a victim to the debate. And although the victim served as a piece of evidence, empirical evidence, served as a source of evidence, was an anecdote, I think it was unfair for Anna Kasparian because it made the debate lopsided. So here we have Anna Kasparian debating Pearl Davis, and then Pearl Davis brought a victim to the debate who had their lived experience and testimony that was spoken, which Pearl did. She spoke on behalf, of course, of the victim that was in the audience. And essentially, from the perspective of probably a debater, it could appear as if they have to challenge not only the person on stage, but the arguments of the victim that's in the audience. And that can be quite difficult to do if the victim has a very sensitive story that is being told, because it could appear as if you are being insensitive to that person's lived experience or their victimization. We've seen this happen when President Trump brought the victims of Bill Clinton to the debate when he was debating Hillary Clinton. We've seen when Zoran Mandani brought the victims of Andrew Cuomo to the debate when he was debating Andrew Cuomo. So it can appear to be insensitive because, of course, the debaters can't really challenge that testimony. And if they do challenge it, they have to do it very sensitive, and they have to be very careful about how they do challenge that testimony. Now, something similar happened to me, although it was not a victim of mine, because I don't have any victims, but it was essentially, I was at Queen's University, Belfast, and we were all students that were talking about a very sensitive topic. It was a sensitive subject, something that happened to me personally, but nobody in the class knew that that happened to me. And it was a topic that was up for debate. And while we were discussing this very sensitive topic, there was a student that was within the classroom who felt, I guess, the topic became too sensitive for him during the debate. And so what I did, because of course I think myself and another student, we were close to this person, this student, we were I think the closest to him, so we were able to like console him. But something that I said to him was, you know, I really understand where you have gone in your experiences, and what happened to you was not good and was not right. And if you need someone to talk to after class, I'm here for you. And I was able to speak about that topic without getting myself personally, in my experience, without like volunteering my lived experience in that particular situation. I was able to like step out of the situation and still argue that topic and still be sensitive for someone who has gone through something similar like I did. And that can be challenging for people who may not have been a victim of a topic being discussed. It can be challenging for a debater to work around how a sensitive topic is being put on center stage when the victim is there in the audience. And it's just something that needs to be done with sensitivity, so you respect the victim and their experiences, not attacking the victim, while still focusing on the argument at hand. There was also interrogation. It was an interrogation portion, which was the interrogatories. And I think at this point, Anna Kasparian, what she did was she challenged the notion of providing an anecdote and numerous anecdotes during a debate. And her justification was that, okay, not only should you provide an anecdote, or actually her justification was that, no, these are anecdotes, you should bring only statistical evidence. And I disagree. I think that anecdotes are evidence. They are empirical evidence. And throughout this debate, Anna Kasparian, she does bring up the idea of having an argument, an empirical argument. But I don't think that she realized that an anecdote in a way can be seen as empirical evidence. It's an observation. If a person, in a sense, it is observable evidence. And I think essentially, if the anecdote is true, that can be seen as empirical evidence. Pearl, she did become quite flustered and frustrated through this debate, which was, I think, unfortunate for her, because while she became frustrated, she engaged in some of the most vile ad hominem attacks, hitting below the belt, which is really never good for debating. Howsoever, she did have a very strong argument when she says, well, what happens to men when they don't pay child support? And her argument was essentially that men are disproportionately ordered to pay child support, compared to men. Howsoever, I think that Anna Kasparian let this topic, she didn't rebut this topic well enough, because she could have pointed to Holly Berry, who had been made to pay child support, or other women that have been made to pay child support when men haven't been made to do so. And I know, debating is difficult, and it can be hard to think on your feet and to come up with rebuttals and rebut those presumptions sometimes that's being made in a debate. But I think what's unfortunate for that portion of the debate is that I don't think that Anna Kasparian had an answer and didn't provide an example to rebut the examples that Pearl did give. However, when it came to the custody question, she did provide a very strong statistic, because Pearl was arguing that, custody should be 50-50, and Anna Kasparian said, only 8% of men ask for custody, which is quite interesting, right? Because if there is an argument being made that custody should be 50-50, but only 8% of men ask for custody, then that supports the argument that women should have custody over the children, if only 8% of men are asking for it. Another argument that I think fell flat for Pearl is that she said that there should be no child support, no alimony for women. But I think that this defeats this whole philosophy of being a trad wife, because we know that trad wives don't work. They stay at home, they take care of the children, they cook, they clean, and they're there to be essentially like a housewife taking care of the children. And I think under this phenomenon of being a trad wife, now you have to correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't did a lot of research on it, but trad wives don't go to college or university. Trad wives don't, and they don't work. So you can see it can be quite, I think it's not reasonable or rational to conclude that there should be no child support or no alimony for a woman if there is a divorce. We are, I think by Pearl's view of this argument, in her view of this argument, she didn't argue this, but I think just what her inference is that trad wives never get divorced. But then we know that that's not reality. That's not reality, that trad wives will always stay with their husband. And if there does happen to be a divorce, then we need to look at the issue of, okay, well, if this trad wife is divorced, then how is she supposed to take care of the children if she, by virtue, gains custody of the children and the man does not? If the man does not ask for custody. Okay, she hasn't been able to work by virtue that she's a trad wife, so she can't work. Or it goes against this philosophy that they have of not working, not going to college or university. So how is she supposed to take care of the children without child support or alimony? What else did I find interesting with this debate? Pearl brought up the subject of paternity fraud, but in her argument it was because of feminism and that she believed that there was paternity fraud and that this was happening. But I think that argument falls flat. There's not evidence that feminists engage in paternity fraud. Indeed, a trad wife could very well engage in paternity fraud as well. A man could engage in paternity fraud too. A man could say that a child is not his. You know, a man can claim that a child is not his. We know that that rarely does happen, but he could either claim that the child is not his, or he could claim that the child is his when it's not. So he can claim that the child is his when it's not, and then he can claim the child is not his when it is, and that is paternity fraud. More so, men claim, we've seen many more cases when men claim that children aren't theirs when it is. And then we've seen a lot less cases when men say children are theirs when it's not. But it can happen both ways. We know that. So the argument that only women, or it's a feminist practice to engage in paternity fraud, is really ludicrous, I think, in my personal opinion. Pearl, she also brought up an argument that men have it unfair because of feminism. And the argument, the example that she gave was that only men are being instructed to enlist in the military, or enlist in war. So they're being called to war. Women are not being called to war. This is the argument that she made. But we know that women serve in the military, right? Women do serve in the military. So that defeats the argument that it is unfair, in my personal opinion, that is unfair, that men have it unfair because both men and women serve in the military. But I think when we look at this deeper, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to like feminism allowed for women to serve in the military, right? Had it not been for feminism, had it not been for this wave of feminism to call for like equality, essentially liberal feminism quite calls for, in some respects, equality, women would not be serving in the military. It would still be based on this patriarchal idea of only men being in the military and not women, which goes against the argument that Pearl is making. Her argument is that men are in the military in abundance, which is unfair. But then you're a trad wife, and trad wives are not supposed to serve in the military. Trad wives are not supposed to work. Trad wives are not supposed to go to the university. So if you believe in this philosophy of being a trad wife, then you should believe that only men should serve in the military. You should believe that no women should be in the military. But to her credit, she did admit that she appears to be more of a feminist than Anna Kasparian. Another argument that I felt that she made that didn't hold up under scrutiny, she said that men did not have the right to face their accusers in court in, I guess, instances where there is a claim of, SA. But that's not necessarily true. Men do have the right to face their accusers in court. They just can't challenge the accuser's sexual past. There are laws, shield laws in place that prevent men from being able to drudge up the sexual past of a woman or a victim to discredit their testimony and to discredit their experience of victimization. So I think that Pearl's argument wasn't strong there. Let's see. Now, Anna Kasparian did come back with a strong rebuttal because Pearl did say, well, only men are losing their lives in the military and police are losing their lives. Only male police are losing their lives. And Anna Kasparian rebutted. She said, well, what about women? Because women police lose their lives as well. Not only do women police lose their lives, women EMT sometimes lose their life. Women in the military, they also sometimes lose their lives. So that was a very strong rebuttal, I think. To reiterate, I think that most of Pearl's arguments were inapposite to what she was there supporting. It more so supported feminism, this critical cultural feminism, which argues and suggests that it is important to examine both hierarchy of rights and connections between people. And that's essentially what they were doing. And that's what Pearl was doing as well. She did that more so than, I think, Anna Kasparian. Anna Kasparian did state that she was engaging in a comparative analysis of the arguments that was being made and challenged. But I also think that Pearl did agree to much of that comparative analysis and agreed with and articulated arguments that was very suggestive of this critical cultural feminism that she claims she disagrees with. Let's see, what else was very interesting? Anna Kasparian, she does win with the argument about Jeffrey Epstein. She says that this was a very strong rebuttal because Pearl, her statement was, well, only men are in jail and serving time that do longer sentences. But then Anna Kasparian says, well, what about the victim? What about the men in the Jeffrey Epstein case? Like, where are they? They're not doing time. They're not in jail. So that defeats her argument. That actually challenges the argument that she's being made, right? Because those men don't have it worse. They're not in jail. They're not being imprisoned. Right? They haven't seen the inside of a jail. To the contrary, it's only been a woman who has been incarcerated. Granted, there was Epstein who was incarcerated, but, took his own life allegedly. That was none of the other perpetrators in the Epstein case have been brought to justice. What else did I find very interesting about this? Let's see. So Anna Kasparian had better rebuttals. In this entire debate, she had better rebuttals, but I think that Pearl Davis had a better list of questions. Anna Kasparian, her questions weren't really that strong, but the questions that Pearl asked were more consistent with her opening statement. Anna Kasparian's opening statement was very short and sweet and was not a very strong closing. And the closing that Pearl made was not a good closing argument, because what she did was she cited new evidence in her closing statement. And if you know anything about debates, you're not supposed to cite new evidence in your closing statement, because that does not give the person the opportunity to rebut those new arguments. And her entire closing statement was citing new evidence, new evidence, new evidence, new evidence. Now, it appears as if I am really singling out Pearl, but the only reason why I'm doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is because, to reiterate, both debaters hit below the belt, and both debaters had ad hominem attacks, and which was something I really disliked about this debate. But Pearl, what she did was she really hit below the belt. Like, for example, she brought up the fact that Anna Kasparian was assaulted by a homeless person, and that was a very low blow during a debate. And I think that Anna Kasparian handled that portion of the debate well. She did curse during the debate and become upset during the debate a bit, but at that time during the debate, when she brought up that very sensitive topic, I think she handled it quite well. Pearl, she also did, like, throughout the debate, she was dredging up a lot of stereotypes about women, doing some dog whistles. And the number one dog whistling she was doing was, she was essentially saying that Anna Kasparian was nagging. Oh, you're nagging, nagging. There goes that nagging. And there, you know, that was just a dog whistle to the men in the audience to clap and to agree with what she is saying. And it wasn't really focusing on the arguments that was being made that Anna Kasparian brought to the table. And so that's what I thought about this debate. I want there to be more of these debates. I think I like this word war debate platform. I think that this was an interesting way to hold conversations with people you disagree with. I like the idea, and I want to see more from this platform. Again, this was a very interesting debate on feminism. I think what I also disliked about this debate is that they didn't really structure a definition for feminism. There's different types of feminism, whether that is radical feminism, liberal feminism, or critical cultural feminism. There's just like different types of feminism, and they didn't really structure it and give like a definition, which I wish they would have done. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you watched the debate, let me know what you think about it. Don't forget to head over to my Facebook. Follow me there. I'll link my Facebook in the description box below. You can do so by searching for my name, Kiana Canada. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.